Just Another Monster contains adult themes, violence, and content that may be sensitive to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Just Another Monster.
Welcome to Just Another Monster Season 1, Episode 3, the show where we shed light on the monsters that live among us. So what does the popular social media app TikTok, randonauting, and shitty roommates have in common? Well, that would be the Blue Room. In this episode, I cover a case that occurred almost exactly 1 year ago to the day. A case where a few TikTok influencers made an unexpected and horrifying discovery in a very peculiar and serendipitous manner. And their discovery exposed a violent and bloody trail that led to a very deranged individual and a blue room. A fair warning to some listeners, there are some particular subjects in this episode relating to sexual assault that some may find triggering and upsetting. So please, for your own mental health, if these subjects are hard for you to listen to, I would suggest not continuing any further with this episode. Well, let's get on with it, shall we? Sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story. A story of just another monster. This story takes place during the first summer of the COVID-19 pandemic that took a hold of our nation and the rest of the world, and honestly seems to still have its grip on us a year and a half later. It was June 19th, 2020. We were just 5 months into the pandemic, and panic buyers were still hoarding toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Protests and riots captured the world's attention, and raging wildfires hit a record peak. And TikTok, a social media app that can be best described as Vine on steroids, was captivating stay-at-home moms, wannabe social media influencers, and bored adults such as myself. There are actually some pretty funny and entertaining people on that platform. It was also the day that 3 teens accidentally discovered a suitcase containing human remains along Alki Beach in Seattle, Washington. The 3 teens that made this horrific discovery were following a popular trend on TikTok that involves using an app called Randonautica that would potentially guide them to strange and unexplainable phenomenon. So I have to pause for a second because I feel I need to provide a little bit of background on Randonautica to better explain the events that took place that day. Randonautica is a mobile app that randomly generates coordinates that encourages its users to explore their local surroundings and report their findings. The app gained significant popularity as it was released just as the world was beginning to shut down in an effort to fight COVID infections. Randonauting itself as an activity is not a new concept. I did some research and I found out that Reddit users had been doing it way before the app was even launched. The community was smaller and more tight-knit, and they considered themselves to be curiosity seekers. The app's creators claim that the app is an attractor of strange things, the world's first quantumly generated choose-your-own-adventure reality game. The developers of Randonautica claim to be inspired by the chaos theory and Guy Debord's theory of the deranged. The app itself offers users 3 types of coordinates to choose from: an attractor, a void, or an anomaly. Now, supposedly, the discoveries made by users depend on the types of coordinates they chose, so think of it as kind of a digital Ouija board for geocachers. As of today, there are millions of randonauters around the globe. As for Guy Debord's theory of the deranged, it is defined as an unplanned journey through an urban landscape in which participants drop their everyday relations and let themselves be drawn by the attractions of the terrain and the encounters they find there. The logo for the app itself is an owl, which is in reference to the frequency illusion, also known as the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. This phenomenon is a cognitive bias in which you begin to notice something peculiar or strange, and then begin to notice it more often, leading someone to believe that they are in sync or functioning on a higher frequency. It's the illusion that something is appearing more often because you are in tune with the phenomenon. For example, say you find yourself in a situation where you start to notice every time you check the time, it's 11:11 or 12:12. Then maybe you go shopping and you buy some stuff and the total comes to 11:11 or 12:12. And you start to notice these occurrences more and more. Yeah, that's the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Sorry, I had to drop a little science on you. The trend on TikTok challenged users to use Randonautica and select their coordinates, then film themselves investigating their findings when they reached their destinations. TikTok was flooded with videos by users doing exactly that, and I admit I've watched some of these as they were being posted. Admittedly, some of those videos were pretty spooky. Some coordinates guided people to abandoned houses in the middle of nowhere. Some took them to an empty parking lot. But for 3 teens in Seattle, it led them to something very sinister.
Police are investigating after several bags filled with human remains were found near the water on Alki Avenue this afternoon.
On the early evening of June 19th, 2020, Seattle police responded to a call down near Anchor Park, which is on Alki Beach, located in Seattle, Washington. The 911 caller had reported that she and her friends had stumbled upon a large suitcase on the rocks near the water. The suitcase was discovered at the location after the teens had followed the coordinates that the Randonautica app had suggested to them. Due to natural curiosity, the teens decided to open the suitcase. I mean, why not, right? What's the worst that can happen after some mobile app leads you there by providing you ambiguous coordinates, right? When they opened the suitcase, it released a smell that was described as putrid and foul. The smell appeared to be coming from a black trash bag inside the suitcase. This is when Seattle police were called to the scene. Twice. In fact, it took them nearly 3 hours to arrive at the scene. Once officers from the Seattle Police Department arrived, they located 2 suitcases at the scene. The second suitcase was found still in the water near the beach, just further down a bit. After some initial investigation, officers determined that both suitcases contained black garbage bags, and inside those garbage bags were human remains. The human remains were later identified by the King County medical examiner as 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and her boyfriend, 27-year-old Austin Cash Wenner. Seattle homicide detectives who worked closely with the King County Medical Examiner's office determined that Jessica Lewis died from multiple gunshot wounds, and her boyfriend, Austin Wenner, died as the result of a single gunshot wound to the torso. Both were killed just days earlier, on or around June 16, 2020. Their deaths were ruled as homicides. Jessica Lewis was described as a kind-hearted mother who worked with developmentally disabled adults. Jessica was a mother of 4 children, and while their names and ages were not disclosed, 2 of them had since graduated high school. One was still attending middle school, The other one was still in grade school. Jessica had her children during a previous relationship. Austin Wenner, who went by Cash, loved and adored Jessica. He loved the outdoors, country music, dogs, and most importantly, family. Jessica and Austin had been together for 8 years. They were described as a nice, normal couple with good hearts and a deep love for one another. Jessica and Austin were trying to make life work for them. Like many young couples, they were working to start a life for themselves, have a home, some stability, avoiding crippling debt. So in an effort to find a home for themselves, they scoured Craigslist for apartments and homes to rent. Unfortunately, their credit wasn't optimal. They made enough money to take care of themselves and survive comfortably, but unfortunately for them, their options were limited. So they had to resort to looking into rooms for rent in the surrounding area. They eventually responded to an ad for a room to rent in the city of Burien, Washington. It's a small rural city about 30 to 40 minutes south of Seattle. The room they were looking to move into was in a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 1,600 square foot home that was built in 1939. It sits on nearly an acre of land just a bit off the main road. The home also has an unfinished basement with interior access. Unsurprisingly, I found the home listed on Zillow and Redfin, but it's currently listed as off the market. The home was owned by a live-in landlord by the name of Michael Lee Dudley. Michael is a portly, 62-year-old male with gray thinning hair and a wiry beard. Not a lot is known about Michael Lee Dudley. There isn't a whole lot there to dig up. I believe he lived largely off of the grid. Though he apparently comes from an affluent family with connections up and down the West Coast, all the way down to California. He was described as a generous, caring, and compassionate man who had a history of doing things like providing aid and assisting in the efforts to control wildfires in California. According to friends and family, Michael Lee Dudley was described as an outstanding citizen, known for his generosity and selflessness and compassion. However, what you don't see reports on is his long, sordid, malevolent, and downright nefarious history. I was able to obtain documents filed with the Pierce County Superior Court that accuses Dudley of a 10-year pattern of sexual assault on his own daughter. His own daughter filed for a sexual assault restraining order against him in June of 2018, almost exactly 2 years before the bodies of Jessica and Austin were discovered. His daughter, whose name is withheld for her own privacy, stated in court documents in reference to Michael Lee Dudley,
"He sexually assaulted me for 9 years, from age 10 until 18, by drugging and raping me, forcing me to share a bed with him from age 10, and making me watch him masturbate while he watched pornography."
The daughter further stated,
"I don't feel safe in my home or leaving my home to work."
She also stated that he would display and make threats using a firearm or other dangerous weapons, and that he posed an imminent and serious threat to the public health and safety. The order, surprisingly enough, was denied by the court. It was stated in certified documents that this allegation and the relationship of the party does not meet the definitions in the sexual assault petition. These allegations fall under domestic violence. Personally, I feel these allegations fall under the definitions of holy shit, this is fucked up. I mean, how does this happen? You have these people that literally shapeshift into these generous and selfless, upstanding citizens, when really, beneath the facade, these vapid, self-aggrandizing human costumes they wear, lies a disgusting monster. And this one is one of the worst I've had the displeasure of reading about. Gina Jasky, who was the aunt of Jessica Lewis, had told Westside Seattle, a news website, that Michael Lee Dudley was a sicko. She explained,
"Sometimes he would break their car so they couldn't leave. He put trackers on people's cars. Anytime he ever got in a dispute with anybody, he would tell them to leave, but try to lock them in the house. He killed the dog in front of them and left the carcass outside for 3 days to scare them. They had nowhere to go. That's why they stayed there.
It gets worse.
He beat this dog to death with a hammer because it got one of his chickens. He just left it out there for the other dogs to look at and sniff. He's a freaking psycho.
Gina continued.
Once there was an electrician guy doing work for him, and they had a falling out, and he was trying to tell the guy to leave, but yet he wouldn't let him leave. He threatened him with a gun, and 911 was called.
Marlise Gordon, an ex-girlfriend of Michael Dudley's, told King 5 News that Michael was abusive towards her as well. Marlise was in an on-again, off-again relationship with Michael from 2002 through 2016. Marlise recalled an incident in 2016 that led Michael Dudley to being arrested and charged with assault. She told King 5 News.
He started to hit me and grab my hair and my head, threw me on the floor, hit my head into the hardwood floor. He threw me and my stuff on his patio out the door, and came out and hit my head on the patio. Did that with one hand and held a gun in another hand.
Unfortunately, I don't think Jessica and Austin knew what they were getting into when they decided to rent a room from Michael Lee Dudley. In fact, they would end up paying the ultimate price for it. Just before COVID began to cripple the world, Jessica and Austin answered Michael Dudley's ad for a room for rent. The single room, known as the Blue Room, was being rented out for $1,500 a month. That's a pretty steep price for a single room for rent. When I went over the files in this case, I always came back to how much Michael Dudley was renting the room for. And I've asked myself numerous times if it was intentional. Intentional as to make it an impossible amount to pay for many. Jessica and Austin agreed to the terms and moved into the home with Michael Dudley. And it didn't take long for things to turn sour after the three were living together. States all around the US started shutting down one by one as the pandemic began to redefine life as we knew it. Millions were affected by job loss and a severe reduction of hours. Many began to struggle, and Jessica and Austin were not immune to the impact. Within a few months of living there, tensions continued to build between Michael, Jessica, and Austin. Things began to hit a boiling point amongst the three as Jessica and Austin could no longer afford the $1,500 a month in rent. Probable cause documents show that Michael Dudley wanted both Jessica and Austin to leave since they could not afford the rent, and he felt that Austin was attracting a criminal element to the home. None of that could actually be corroborated, considering 2 of the 3 people involved were, well, dead. What we do know is that neighbors had called the police on June 9th, 2020, because they had heard yelling within the house, followed by gunfire. One of the neighbors had told detectives that right before they reported hearing gunfire, they heard a male voice yelling,
"Please, don't do this. Just let me leave."
Police had responded to the call but received no response when they arrived at the residence. Another witness had come forward to state that she arrived at the Dudley residence the very same day the yelling and gunfire was heard. She was apparently going to be moving into one of the rooms that Michael Dudley had available. When the woman arrived at the home, she decided to use the shower. And when she came out, she noticed a pile of clothes in the center of the blue room. There appeared to be the silhouette of a human underneath the pile of clothing and a bloody arm sticking out of it. It was at this time that Michael Dudley asked her to leave the premises as he had to
clean up my mess.
And she complied. She ended up returning that very same evening and approached Michael and asked him what had happened. He gave a simple response.
My gun worked, and his didn't.
Now, what I don't understand is why police weren't called immediately after this. I mean, this occurred on the 9th. Their bodies weren't discovered for nearly a week after that. And what strikes me is that this witness literally left the scene after seeing what appeared to be a body, then actually came back on purpose, only to gain confirmation from Michael Dudley that he had basically just killed someone. Now, am I losing my mind here, or does that sound odd to anyone else? With this information, detectives were able to obtain a search warrant for Michael Dudley's residence. and it was served on August 19th, 2020. During the service of the warrant, crime scene investigators discovered bullet holes, bullet strikes, and spent rounds, along with a large amount of blood, all within the blue room. It was also clear that the room was recently cleaned and painted. Michael Dudley admitted to having arguments with the victims, and when he was asked about the blood, he stated that Jessica had cut herself before, and when he was asked if the blood was hers, he stated he didn't know. He also could not or would not explain the bullets and the bullet holes in the room. Detectives were also able to confirm the last few phone calls to the victims' cell phones came from Michael Dudley himself, and the last ping on the victims' cell phones was on the tower nearest to his home. Michael Lee Dudley was charged with 2 counts of murder in the second degree, along with the death and dismemberment of Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner, and this case is currently still being actively investigated. Detectives have come to believe that Michael Lee Dudley did not act alone. Witness statements were made that alluded to the fact that Michael Dudley is well connected and has close ties with known criminals. He is also very well off and could afford the help needed to pull off something like this. The charging documents state that he likely had help dismembering and disposing of the bodies. On August 22, 2020, just a few days after Michael Lee Dudley was arrested and charged with the murders of Jessica Lewis and Austin Wenner, 2 men and a woman were arrested for trespassing on the Dudley property. At around 6:15 that evening, the 2 men and the woman that accompanied them had cut the padlock on the main gate to the property, and they were in the process of towing a vehicle off of the property before they were interrupted by police. It is unknown as to why they were trying to tow the vehicle away. Now, considering this is an active investigation, I can probably guess that these 3 people were ordered by Dudley to remove one of his vehicles from his property. And it's very possible that it was the vehicle that was used to transport Jessica and Austin's remains. This is just me speculating though. My guess is that the police were probably waiting for them. If I had to guess, Michael Lee Dudley likely made a phone call to have the vehicle removed. Now, those phone calls are recorded, so the Burien police were probably already aware of what these people were about to do. All 3 of them were booked for burglary. This case is still very active, but with the mountain of evidence against him, I suspect Michael Lee Dudley will get what's coming to him in due time. As I mentioned earlier, it's been just a little over a year since the day that Jessica and Austin were found. On June 9th, 2021, family and friends of the victims held a vigil for Jessica and Austin near Anchor Park, where the bodies were found. The small group gathered to honor and remember the couple by writing messages on floating lanterns. Austin Wenner's mother, Charlene Creans, with the help of Jessica Lewis's aunt, Gina Jaski, organized the event. Creans told the Westside Seattle,
"They are safe now and with each other. God brought them to this place."
Gina shared a message from Jessica Lewis's parents who were unable to attend.
"My brother's grief for his only daughter is something that can't be put into words. On behalf of our family, I just want to thank the kind people of Seattle for helping look out for the memorial of Austin and Jessica down on Alki."
A small memorial made up of flowers, crosses, and photos remains by the shore on Alki Beach, a solemn reminder of the love Jessica and Austin had for one another. My heart goes out to the families of Jessica and Austin, and especially Jessica's children. Thank you for listening to Just Another Monster Season 1, Episode 3. My apologies for not getting this episode out sooner, but I had some life stuff happen that took time away from me being able to complete this episode earlier. In fact, the subject of these life events is going to be one of the upcoming episodes of the show. It's going to be an important episode, one that I think everyone needs to hear. Now, if you liked this episode, please be sure to follow and subscribe, and please share the show with someone you know that enjoys these kind of shows. And be sure to call in and ask about the case, or leave some feedback, or just let me know how you're doing. I would love to hear from you. Also, our very first episode of Just Another Monster Blacklight is coming soon, and I'd love to answer all of your questions during the show. So remember, you can call in at 520-428-4373, or email me at justanothermonsterpodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.